I don't know about you, but February is probably the worst month for me because I am totally sick of winter, and yet it's still too early to plant a lot of things. I am gonna go in the basement right now and check out my seedlings and show you what I have started already. And yes, I can only access my basement from outside, which is super fun when it's 0 degrees out. Thankfully, that's not the case today. I think it's probably like 40, which at this point in the season feels like 60 to me because I've just gotten so used to it being frigid. I don't have a ton of stuff started. Like, you'll probably look at this and think like, she's a gardener, why does she have so few seeds started? But honestly, doing like low maintenance gardening, I tend to focus on plants that can be direct sown as much as possible. And that's what I'm going to talk to you guys about today, because there's a list of things that can be direct sown before your last frost, even here in zone 6B in February, as long as the ground can be worked. And if you're not starting seeds just to feel something, then we can't be friends. So I'm gonna show you what I have growing now, and then I'm gonna show you exactly what I'm planting directly outside. First, let me show you my babies. The previous owners left me some lovely graffiti to go with my seed starting station, and I do this very simple. So this is gonna be the cheapest setup you can possibly do for grow lights. We can do a more specific seed starting video if you want. Right now I'm just going to talk about the plants that I'm actually growing. I will say I finally got fed up with these trays because they were breaking and literally I was getting cuts on my hands from them. So I ended up getting these ones that are a lot shallower, but they're still deep enough to do my bottom watering just fine. They're going to outlive me. They've got this cross hatching on the bottom. They're so sturdy. So no more seeds flip-flopping and falling all over the place with these supposedly heavy-duty trays. And I know we don't want to use any more plastic than we have to in the garden. I did soil blocking for a while. With my arthritis, plunging that plunger over and over again was very painful for my hands. So for accessibility reasons, I am stuck with the plastic containers. But if you have to use plastic, using plastic that's first of all recycled, and second of all going to outlive you, so it's not going to end up in a landfill, is the best way to go. So I'll link those down below. Also have their 6 cells, which they also have this hole in the bottom so you can just push it out really easily without having to squeeze it. And they have pink, which who doesn't love pink? These are the 4 cells, which are obviously larger. I'll be potting up my tomatoes and peppers into these. Anyway, let's talk about the plants themselves. I have some artichokes here that I started quite a while ago. These are the first things that I started because growing them here in a northern climate, you have to know some tricks to get them to actually produce in their first year, which I can go into in another post if you want. Behind the artichokes, I just have some cold season stuff. So I have broccoli, lettuce, and arugula. And then I did like an extra tray of arugula and lettuce because I had doubles in some of these trays. Because I don't know about you, but I have the hardest time thinning seedlings. I feel so bad. And they are edible. You could just snack on them as you're thinning, but I always end up wanting to save them and just sticking them in another tray and then having way more than I actually need. These are all my peppers. They are on a heat mat, which I can link for you guys too if you don't have one. It's a pretty basic one. I have Scotch bonnets, Aurora peppers, which kind of like are a really cool bushy pepper, and they'll be multiple colors. So they'll be purple, red, orange, yellow, depending on how ripe they are. And I think I'm going to do those in containers. I have sweet peppers. Most of these are going to be from botanical interest, so I will link the ones that I can below from them. Millionaire eggplant, sweet red eggplant. In the very back is diamond eggplant. And then I have 2 rows of King Richard leeks. So very much not a production garden. I like to have a little of a lot of things. So that's why you'll see there's not huge quantities of each of these. If you want to grow these things in order to be self-sustaining, you would definitely need to be growing a lot more. Just started a succession planting of more lettuce and arugula and my first round of spinach. And I think I put scallions in here. I have to label this. I'm the worst. Like, I'll be so good about it and then one will slip by me and I'll be like, it's fine, but I know I'm gonna forget. All right, I'm gonna grab my seed binder and we'll go upstairs and we'll chat a little bit about what varieties you can be planting in the ground now to give ourselves a little bit of a boost while we wait for the warmer weather to actually show up. There was one thing I wanted to show you out here before the snow melts. I love it when it snows and I can come outside and see what kind of wildlife has been moving around while I've been asleep. Because I know there's a lot of it, like we're in a rural area, but I don't get to see most of it. And what I found was, so there's some deer tracks because they use this property. They go from the land across the street, they cut through our property and they go across this field to the river. And then directly adjacent to the deer tracks, coyotes. all over the place. There's also lots of cat prints, of course, which those are exciting, but they're not as exciting to me because they don't let me pet them. I just heard the crows. They saw me. They've been very insistent lately that I give them their treats. I'm trying to keep it very irregular and just small amounts, but they've figured out which window is my bedroom, and they've been staking themselves outside of it and cawing until I come and put out snacks for them on their little rock. So I think they just saw me and they're gonna come over, so we should probably give them a snack. I've been having way too much fun with this thing with the crows. If you want to befriend crows, you have to be very patient. I've only just gotten to the point where I can look at them directly, and I've been feeding them for a while now. But when you first start, you need to use a very high value treat like peanuts, and you should just put the treats out and walk away and don't watch them because it makes them nervous. And they left me my first gift, but it was a like an owl pellet, but from a crow, which I didn't know that they did was a thing. A little kind of like ominous. I'm like, is this a good thing for them to give me this? I don't know if this means they like me or not. So I just do a sprinkling. You don't want them to become dependent on you. It's just a treat. I do have 6 of them though, so I try to leave a good amount. Even though there's still snow on the ground, this is one of the first days that I've actually heard spring birds outside, and it literally, nothing makes me happier. Nothing gives me more hope that this season is coming to a close. Daylight savings is gonna be soon. We're gonna have more sunlight. Some of you are gonna think I'm crazy for this, but I think we're gonna actually do this outside. If you're a northerner, you probably understand why I have to be outside right now on one of the few sunny days we've had in a while. It may not be warm, but it's warm enough. This way we can also keep an eye out there and see if the crows come up for their snack. We've got our trusty seed binder. A couple of you made some really good points about this. I'm still loving it as a system overall. However, it doesn't work for seed saving, which I do have another solution for that, which I'll hopefully be sharing with you soon. It doesn't work for really large size seeds like bean packets or corn. And a lot of you said they were frustrated because if you tip it over at all, like the seeds can still spill out. But I've always retaped my seed packets shut, so it's just never been an issue for me personally. And of course, there's the plastic use concern with this as well, but I will say you can very easily thrift these. A lot of times they've never been used. They've just been sitting in somebody's craft cabinet. So I highly recommend looking at a thrift store for something like this. And again, if you can't find it at a thrift store, just getting something that's super high quality, that's going to last as long as possible and not end up in a landfill. It's not ideal, but again, when we're working with things where we need accessibility for various reasons, a lot of the times the options that are available to us are not ideal. So I'm just gonna kind of flip through this and do kind of a train of thought of like what we can plant now. Obviously our squashes and melons and cucumbers are not going in yet. Even things like our sugar snap peas, we do have to wait a little bit longer, but not much longer. Actually, I've really seen a lot of people do their snap peas very early, and I would be tempted to experiment with that because they are super frost tolerant. It's the flowers that don't do as well. So if you could get them in the ground, but they don't flower until after your last frost day, I feel like they would be okay. But I don't know. Let me know if you try that. I'm not officially recommending it or anything like that. Okay, this is a big one, which I already kind of alluded to showing you earlier, but I will say for direct sowing, it's a really great low maintenance one. And that's the focus of what I'm going to be talking about today. You could put in carrots right now, but they're not going to be low maintenance. And I want to be sharing with you really easy, really low maintenance stuff that you can put in. I'm not just sharing low maintenance for beginners though. This time of year is very hard for me with my chronic pain. Anytime there's a change in the seasons, usually in the fall and the very early spring, I experience a lot more pain and fatigue, and that has been the case for me the last few weeks. So I'm just gonna take it easy with the garden right now. This time of year, there's a lot less pressure from pests. So it's a really easy time of year to garden. If you're experiencing fatigue or chronic pain, or you're just a beginner, there's a lot of things that you can start right now that are super easy to grow. And arugula is definitely one of them. I'll link these varieties down below. I've talked about this a little bit. Arugula is actually one that I hated up until recently, but this ASTRO variety, especially if you pick it young enough, it doesn't have that really peppery, overpowering flavor. And if you grow it in colder temperatures, which is true for a lot of these, it's going to be sweeter to begin with. ASTRO is just really easy to grow. And if you want to make it even easier, getting it from a place that you know has really reliable germination rates like botanical interest will make it that much simpler. I've been throwing ASTRO in salads a lot. I'll put it on toast with like feta and radishes. For kale, I do have this dinosaur variety. I've never grown this one myself. I always do red Russian kale. I don't know why I've been stuck on red Russian kale for the longest time. Red Russian kale is really great as a baby green. I have found that it's very susceptible to cabbage moths, which are a huge issue in my area. So I'm very curious to try dinosaur and see if it's a little bit less susceptible to the cabbage moths. I have heard that it can be. My kale generally lasts all year round, even when it hits 90 or 100 degrees outside. If I just throw a little bit of cover over it, it's okay. One of the more substantial ones that I think is great for direct sowing and just overall very versatile to use in the kitchen is bok choy. I actually just harvested all of the bok choy out of my greenhouse. I ended up freezing a bunch of it, and I did a really cool recipe in the air fryer, which is up on my Instagram page, where they're like breaded and dipped in this sauce. It is so good. I'm gonna throw these seeds into whiskey barrel containers. You could put them in winter sowing containers. If your soil is still frozen, adding a row cover or some kind of frost cloth to let it trap some of that natural daylight heat from the sun will thaw it out pretty quick, so you can get any of this stuff in the ground as soon as that ground can be worked. They're very frost tolerant, and they're generally really fast to mature. All the cold season crops that I like to direct sow this time of year mature in 1 to 2 months. Or you can enjoy them as baby greens too. I like to have those quick crops going in succession. So we're doing a new crop of it every 2 weeks to get us through to our last frost date, which I don't know if I've said, but here in zone 6B, usually like the 1st of May. Nothing gets more low maintenance than a perennial, and common sorrel is a great one for that, especially in our cold climates. It will come back as a perennial. It will get pretty big, honestly. This one's cold hardy down to zone 3. I feel like it's still a little bit early to put lettuce in outside. I'm not gonna tell you not to, like definitely experiment with it. I probably will. Spinach is of course gonna be a classic. I always grow BLOOMSDALE. It does so well this time of year. For a long time, I was starting spinach way too late. I was waiting up until like just a couple of weeks before my last frost date, and honestly, I had such little success with it. It loves germinating in the cold. It just loves it. BLOOMSDALE, I feel like, has a really like thick, almost like juicy, succulent leaf. We have to talk about our radishes. I have 3 different varieties of radishes that I grow. Black Spanish radish, which needs shortening daylight hours, so do not grow it now. That's a fall radish only. I really like my radishes to offer a wide variety of color and shapes. I'll generally do an Easter egg radish because I get so many different colors from it. Also a really nice small radish, which I love radishes, but I don't want to eat a heck of a lot of them. And what's great about these is you can just then let them go to seed as the weather warms up and eat the seed pods too, which I actually kind of like radish seed pods a little bit more than I even like radishes. So I do the Easter egg blend. And I also do French breakfast radishes. And I think I like these even better because they're just a little bit more mild and they look so fancy on a plate. It's very low investment, high reward visually. They're so easy to grow. They're basically foolproof. Radishes I do a little bit deeper because they're a bigger seed and you want your seeds planted about 2 or 3 times deeper than the width of the seed. So those should be about like 1/2 inch deep into the ground. A lot of these I'll just throw on the surface. Like kale, I have surface sown, and I know it's supposed to be like a 1/4 inch deep, but I've surface sown it for baby greens and it has done so well. When you're a cold season gardener, a lot of the advice is around what not to do. And there's good reason for a lot of that advice, but I do think gardening has been overcomplicated in many ways, and there's a lot of rules that I think, if you know them, can be broken for the sake of experimentation with a lot of success. And of course there's some privilege in that, right? Like if you only have the money to buy 1 packet of each type of seed, you're not going to want to waste those seeds if you're not certain that they'll come up. But if you can get to the point where you've got some extra, and a lot of seed packets do come with many more seeds than you need, I definitely encourage you to experiment because you may be pleasantly surprised by the results. There's a lot less limitations to what we can do in a cold climate than you might think. And it's more about shifting your mindset from this attitude of fighting against nature or what can't I do, and working with nature instead and accepting the limitations of the climate and the season that you're in. So obviously We're not trying to grow our tomatoes right now, but that doesn't mean there aren't other vegetables that we can enjoy at this time of year that maybe just aren't as culturally significant in our traditions here in America. But for example, like French gardeners have been growing this stuff and mustards and like all these incredible different types of produce that aren't as common in our cuisine here for centuries. Accepting that there are limitations, but you can work within them, can make a huge difference in your gardening experience. So I hope that you'll give some of these a try. Please let me know if you do. Thank you as always for gardening with me, and happy growing.